Hey car fans, in this video we're going to make new brake lines. All of the brake lines for the entire car. I'm going to show you how to measure and plan and bend and flare and do all the things. So, check it out.
Garage time.
There are a few materials and tools you will need. Clearly you need brake line. You will need the brake line fittings. You'll need a tubing cutter and benders. And then you'll also need a flaring tool. Okay, one of the big debates lately is the actual brake line material, and there's really three types. I have two of them here. This is the nickel copper. It's gotten pretty popular lately. This is the plain old steel. This is what the factory used on most cars. And then there's, of course, stainless steel. This NICOP stuff is certainly easy to use. You can see the difference. It's like really soft versus this is really rigid. I'm just going to go with the steel stuff, especially in the tunnel. I don't want the more soft line to be rattling around in there, and I don't want it to wear through. That would be a catastrophic failure. I've yet to paint my dual master cylinder pedal box, but that's okay. I'm going to be putting it in position and looking at the routing of the brake lines from the master cylinders all the way to the front and rear wheels. Inside the car here, the brake line, at least the factory brake line, is still intact. Okay, right here is the brake line, and here's one of the tabs that secure it inside the tunnel. And then right here where the shifter access hole is another one of those tabs with some protective rubber on it. This is the brake line running right through a rubber grommet to the back of the tunnel. These lines are steel, by the way. Right here is the brake line. These are the fuel lines I put in, and this is the brake line, so it's almost coming through the hole already. Just need to pull it backwards. Okay, right back here, this is the brake line at the rear of the tunnel, and then this is the junction where it goes from left to right wheels, and then this block attaches right here to the transmission mount. I'll probably need to replace this grommet. It has a clip on the end. Yeah. So this grommet is a split grommet, so I don't need to have the grommet before I do the flaring. If you've never seen these wrenches before, these are specifically for brake lines or for hydraulic lines. It's just a box end wrench with a little slot on the end, so it gets a maximum grip on the nut there, so it doesn't shear it off or round it off. This is a very old can of carburetor cleaner, so I'm just going to drop that in there while we work on something else. That's straight enough on the tube. Like I did with the fuel tubing, I spent a lot of time straightening it out, and it wasn't really necessary because it's going to get a little bit bent as it goes through the tunnel anyways. Here is what the bubble flare looks like for the DIN specification. This is what the factory uses. I did chamfer the inside of the hole and took all the burrs off. Just coated the end in some die chem. I'm gonna cinch it up to one of the old brake hoses and just make sure that it looks like it's making good contact. Probably not gonna pressure test this. This is pretty conventional, pretty easy stuff to do. So it wore the blue off all the way around and it has good contact all the way through the cone. So I think this is good to go. Anti-seize, just a little dab on the ends. Okay, operation 0 is just pushing the tube which is sticking out of the dies. It just makes it flush and pushes the dies all the way back. Now you can see in there that the tubing is not sticking out, it's just flush in the dies. And then we switch to operation 1. And before I forget, I'm going to slide this nut on because if you do both sides, you'll never get the nut on. I missed this one a little bit, so this bend should have been a little bit further away from the first bend. So it's no big deal. This is extra long, so I'm going to cut it and do it again. Now it's a little bit closer, kind of hard to hold these floppy tubes, but this is a little bit more in line. Radiuses are different, it's not exactly perfect, but I think it's going to fit. Okay, this is the new versus old. Just laying here on the floor, let's fish it through. Okay, I've taped up the end, and now it's just time to jam it in there. The length looks just about right, so I'll be putting the brass fitting on this side. I need to go find that. Yeah, I found the front fitting. It's got a little bit of yellow paint on it, and the bushing or the grommet and then the spring, this is all for the front. The rear piece is in here, so let's swap it out. This needs just a little bit more time, but most of the junk is off of it. One of the holes is still got some black inside there. Okay, I got this new tubing in here with the rubber grommet. That's the original rubber grommet. I'll probably replace it with a new one, but it seems to be holding up actually pretty well. And then the wire harness, this is the wire harness. It's pretty close here, but there's enough give in the harness where it's not going to be really pushing up against the brake line. That's just the way it folds. There's definitely room. I can get my finger underneath there. I put another piece of rubber right here because it does contact this tube right here. This is a solid tube. Here's where the clips are to hold the brake line. You know, there's no rattling. So I'm trying to make it rattle and I can't. So the fact that it's secured here and also secured at the front, it's good to go. I probably could have put an elbow here and gone right to the master cylinder for the rear brakes, but I felt like the grommet and the way that the factory line runs is probably better just to leave it stock Okay, this definitely needs more time. The yellow paint is not even really softened. I mean, I guess it's pretty good paint if it won't come off in the chemical stripper, but it will eventually come off. I just need to leave it in there longer. Here's how it looks like in the front. This is the brake line with the angle fitting on it, the stock fitting. And I have these two fuel fittings, which I have to go around. So it's gonna be pretty tight, but the original fuel lines went up over the top of this rack and then over the cross member and then out right about here to where it attaches to the fuel tank. So I'll probably route this fuel or the brake line underneath the fuel lines and then into these holes right here. This welding wire is showing the routing of the hose. So I'm going to move inside now and figure out what I need to do to connect it to the master cylinder. This is the shape I came up with. It's a pretty short length because it's real close. So I'm just going to try it. Wish me luck. So it's not half bad for the first pass. Goes right inside here. I think this leg here could just be slightly longer to keep it away from this fuel fitting, because this is going to be kind of right here. But it looks pretty good. Let me show you what happened though that's wrong. This is the tube sleeve. It's not that I forgot to put it on. It's the fact that I needed to flare the end first because the dies are pretty long and there's just not enough room to slide the sleeve back before you do the flare or after. You know, it's just an order of operations. I need to flare it first, bend it second. I just made this short little guy for the front brakes. So I'm going to hook it up to the front master cylinder and try to tee it out to the wheels. Let's see how it fits. So here you can see the rubber fuel line, and then it switches to the hard line, which is the one I just made. It goes right there in the factory, location. And then the factory provided this little clip right here. So it's going through there. I need to put the rubber insulating tube in there. And then it terminates here into this T. And the front is done. Through the clip right there. And then right here, I've done some temporary zip tie braces. They make some brake line clamps more professional, but that's to keep these brake lines from rubbing into each other. So I'll replace these with some professional ones once I order them. I'll probably order them at the same time I order the fittings for these these gas lines. I'm in the back again, and this is the tunnel line that's brand new. And then I found this old line. I put it back in just for measurement, and it goes along the torsion bar tube here. Here's a factory clip. It's going over these fuel lines again. It goes behind the torsion tube, kind of in the seat pan area, and then it comes along here. This is where I modified for the camber box, and then it terminates at this clip. Now, I had to add this extension on here because my seat pans have been cut away. This whole chunk has been cut away. But this is the factory position of
where the brake line attaches to the body. And then from here, it goes with a rubber line kind of from here to here, because this arm obviously moves up and down.
That's 400 grit paper. And if you've noticed, I'm switching between the dies. Some of these lines have the AN fittings because I'm using modern master cylinders, and some of them are using the factory double DIN flare. So this is for the AN. All you gotta do is pop this off, pop this on, and then use the correct dies. I want to show you how I mark the length of this complicated shape. I'll just lay it on a flat surface. Right now I'm working on the ground. And then each time there's a bend, I sort of mark both tubes. And then I continue rolling the tube on the floor. And if it tends to slip, I can always go back to where these two marks are. So I'm rolling it. These two line up right here, and then that's my new reference. I don't have to worry about maintaining this reference because each time I get to a complicated section, I got a mark. So there's another mark. Just rolling it along the floor here. There's a mark. So from there, rolling again, mark it.
Okay, I can't find the brake line that goes on this side, so I looked at some pictures and I discovered an error. This piece is on wrong. It's supposed to be 90 degrees this way, so I got to undo everything and hopefully it still lines up. Nope, this is not it. Okay, finally got this orientated correctly, and this line here just heads up right next to this trailing arm, and then through the hanger there's going to be another hard line connection there which goes from this junction over to the caliper. That should be a stock line. I need to double check my calipers.
Here's one of my calipers. These are the rears, and the fitting on the end of here is compatible with the stock thread. So it uses the double DIN, or I could remove this whole fitting and use the banjo fitting if I need to. Thanks for sticking around to the end of this video. Give yourself a pat on the back. Hey, I just want to take a few minutes to really talk about this whole journey of this car. You know, I'm getting excited. In the next few weeks, I'm going to be working on the engine, and I'm going to be pushing to get the car drivable as quickly as possible. You know, most of the major fabrication that I have planned for the short term is done for this car. But, you know, in 2017, I bought this car, and it sat in the garage because I was afraid to get started on it. I knew it was a big project, and of course, I haven't finished the 356 yet either. So I repaired some of the accident damage. This is prior to YouTube, and I got the car titled, and I considered selling it. You know, I was going to make maybe $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on it just as a flip. And then I started YouTube and started going through a lot of the backdate process and things right up my alley: fabrication, cutting, modifying, and really started to decide maybe I should keep this car. I'm really enjoying it. And then I got to the painting phase, and I just want you guys to know how these projects like this, they're not like super linear. they are messy. I mean, messy in a literal sense and also in a figurative sense. So you guys know the painting process wasn't my favorite, and I absolutely pushed the painting process through probably prematurely. There were things that I could have done prior to paint, like fabricating the whole gas tank and the pedal box and getting the undercoating and all the repairs done to the floor pan, all that stuff that I've done recently. You know, that probably should have been done prior to paint. But guess what? Sometimes projects stall out, and if you don't keep the motivation up and you don't push things forward, you know, there's a high probability most projects don't get done. You see all the time for sale project car, or something forces sale, you gotta get rid of it. So projects like this oftentimes, like in my case, either don't even get started, or if they do get halfway started, they don't get finished. So that's a real thing. You know, on YouTube, it's step-by-step weekly progress, and you have to do that. You have to break the project up into small pieces and march forward little bit, little bit, little bit. However, some points you get a little bit jaded and you're like, well, I'm not seeing the end in sight, and I just want to do something that's a little bit more exciting. And last week I did the suspension bushings, again, out of order. Why? Because I wanted to put something nice and new and shiny on the car for a change instead of buying a bunch of used parts. So that's exciting for me. Maybe it wasn't for you, but those are the kind of ups and downs that a project like this goes through. So if you're buying a car, or you already have a car, just know that it's not like it is on YouTube where you just see build, build, build. So that's just a little bit of kind of behind the scenes story about what it takes to do a car project like this. And I know some of you have reached out to me and you're thinking about buying a car project, which I totally get behind, totally recommend it. But it's not, like I said, super stable. You're gonna have ups and downs, and it's really, it comes down to motivation. So if you got value out of that, give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you guys are struggling with. You know, what are you working on that you don't want to work on, and how can you get through it?